I think I'm on. Good morning. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you guys. This is what we call God's country. I came in yesterday afternoon or evening. Should have been early afternoon. But as I came in, I'm guests in the home of Dr. Chris and Jerry, and I was on the way in on the phone, talking to him just to make sure I was doing the right thing. And what's that right thing? Like I have an accent. I don't have an accent. I'm between Haiti and Jamaica in here because I'm Southern Illinois. Is it Southern Illinois? Close to it? That's right. Okay. With that said, so I'm on the way in, and I'm talking to him, and my brain, my mind, you'll hear a little bit about the fact that I was blind, and I drove all the way from Illinois to here. So there is a God, and he knows my name. But with that said, as I was coming in, and we're wrapping up the conversation just to make sure I was on the right path, he knows me well, I hit the end button to the directions as opposed to the end button to the call. And when I still heard him hang up the phone, I'm like, I don't think I hit the right end. And then I looked down, and there was no more maps, and the rest was history. So I started like turning down some long gravel roads y'all got down here. Like, where do they go? And the train tracks, like, where do they, like, and farm country. Yes, it was a beautiful time, beautiful place. There was at one point I was like, Lord, I don't know where I am, but I know you do. So, be my light and my salvation, lead me on. That's what I was singing. Anyways, I'm here. So, my name is Lennox Barnett, and it is a privilege and honor to be with you today in the house. Love your worship team. Love love the sweet, sweet space of worship that happens here. And I just was so delighted, just was so ushered in to be reminded that on Father's Day, the greatest father of all is a good, good father. And I am loved. You are loved by him. And so as I move on, though, from that, I just want to say happy Father's Day to all you dads in the room. You are honored today. And without you, there wouldn't be us. So here you go. Happy Father's Day. So yes, my name is Lennox Barnett, and I was born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica. I'm a missionary in Haiti, and you guys are like, well, what? Wait a second. You're born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica. You live here in the United States. You're a missionary in Haiti. I'll connect all them dots for you. But we all are people of stories. We like stories. That's why Hollywood makes it so big, right? And authors, best-selling authors. And do you guys mind? I move around a lot. Is that okay? Okay, all right. Follow the Jamaican. Sorry, some of you are going to leave with some, like you got whiplashed or something. And it's like, I got this at church. They had a Jamaican there, and we don't know what he was on. We were told that stuff cools you down, but that boy was moving. I was glad when they said unto me, let us go in the house of the Lord. So we all like stories. That is why Hollywood has made it so big. There's just millions of dollars in the movie industry, in the book industry. I mean, if you write stories, if you blog, people are making money off of blogs just telling stories, because stories paints a picture of something that draws us into an experience that we might have not had if it weren't for that particular story. You see, Jesus told stories. One of the ways he communicated was through this thing called parables, where he explained from this event that happened to this, that happened to that, and then we are at this point through a story, and people were drawn to it. And here's the truth. The truth is, we are all a story that God, the author, is writing. So today, I want to share with you my story. And my hope is this, that at the end of our time together, that you would get a clear kind of understanding and glimpse of where you are at, regardless of what your story is, and it would draw you closer to the author and perfecter of your story and of your faith. in this house. Because the truth is, we live in a world today that is just unbelievably chaotic. Am I the only one who is going like, what is happening? Like 2 years of our lives were just like taken by this virus that Dr. Fauci thought that he could kill. Where is that guy? All of that stuff. Sorry if you love him. But like, you get what I'm trying to say? Like all of this, like it just happened, right? I mean, and then like we're almost like on the brink of war. Are we gonna war? Are we gonna do this? Like chaos. There's like these devastating situations that are happening, like school shootings, and it continues to spiral down. And we're going, what is going on? What is it? But I will tell you today that there is one who sits high and looks low, and he is still in control. He is still in control. And he wants you to know that in the midst of chaos and in the midst of uncertainty and in the midst of this downward spiral feeling of frustration and brokenness and the world feeling like it's imploding on itself, he's saying, I am that I am who sent you. And I'm writing your story. I am writing your story. And I've got this whole world in my hand. But in the center of the world, I've got you on my mind. That's our God. Share with you a few passages of scripture. And today, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to just preach and then we turn our Bibles to this. I'm just going to tell you up front what these scripture verses are going to be, and then you're going to hear me spit them out and remind you of them and how they pertain to me and my walk and my journey and my story. Let's start off. Habakkuk. I'm Jamaican. You can take the man out of Jamaica, but they can't take the Jamaica out of the man. So, if you understand that. Still got a little accent, so bear with me. It definitely is not Southern. But I'll try. Habakkuk says this. He says, watch and wait. Because this is him telling what the people what God had said. And I believe, yes, as it was for the people in Habakkuk's day, I really believe that God's word is still for us to remind us of his faithfulness and for him to communicate to us of his promises. I believe that. If you're a theologian, I'm sorry, but I do believe that God communicates to us with the word that was sent forth. Habakkuk says this. He says, watch and wait. Be utterly amazed for the things I'm about to do in your lifetime. If I were to tell you these things, you would not believe me. Let me say it one more time again, and I want you to hone in. I want you to just kind of reach in there with me. Habakkuk 1:5 says this, watch and wait, be utterly amazed for the things I am about to do in your lifetime. If I were to tell you these things ahead of time, you would not believe me. That's one. Psalms 40 verses 1-3 is the second one, and it says this, I waited patiently upon the Lord. He turned to me. Another version says, he inclined his ears to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the miry muck, set my feet upon a rock, given me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise. Now many will see and hear and put what? Their trust in him. Hold on to those verses. There'll be more of that, those verses later. So, my mom, 6 months pregnant, she, at the age of 18, was diagnosed with hypertension and also diabetes, and was a nurse. And she was admitted in the university hospital because she was pregnant with me and they couldn't control her blood pressure, so they had her on bed rest. And in Jamaica, to make sure that you're on bed rest, they just tie you down in the hospital, right? And so here she is. She was a nurse still for most of her life. She gave a lot of care. She sat at the bedside of many patients, but then she actually was an occupant of a bed because of all her medical issues throughout her lifetime. And here her 6 month I would say I don't even know what trimester that is, Dr. Chris, but it's one of the trimesters. And she was having high blood pressure, so they put her in the hospital. And she was there. My grandma, however, worked at the hospital too. My grandma was a seamstress. She sewed. She would make our school uniforms and everything like that. But she had a very unique job at the hospital. At the hospital back then, they had a sewing room, and they would actually have people literally sew the bed linen. They would sew the gowns and the lab coats that the doctors would wear. They would sew it's called autoclave. I don't know. I just heard my grandma say autoclave. I think it has something to do with sterilizing cloth or whatever. Dr. Chris, I'm so sorry. I always call on you because I love doctors. I really do. Like, I can see, whatever. And you're cool. So, and you're smart. But with that said, she was a seamstress, and she came in and would sew. She came in one morning because my mom was in the hospital, and before she would go to the sewing room, she would visit my mom, and she came in to visit, and she saw that my mom had this rash on her, and she says, "You got a rash?" And my mom says, "Yeah, I feel a little feverish too. I got this like headache, and a little different from high blood pressure." I don't know how you can tell the difference. My mom knew, but she knew something was off, and my grandma, she was just like, okay, I'll be right back. Grandma walks up to the nurse's station, and she does something that you cannot do in America. She goes to the nurse's station, and she says to the nurse, "Nurse, what is the lady in next to my daughter for?" Now, in Jamaica, the hospital system is like this. The medical ward is one big room like this, and they just have bed. No, you don't get your little private room, your little private bathroom. Sometimes not even a bedpan. You don't get any of that. It's a third world country. And so, my mom was laying next to somebody, and of course, my grandma wanted to find out, what the lady was in for, and she asked the nurse, and you can't do that in America because there's something that protects it. It's called HIPAA, okay? But in Jamaica, I'll tell you this, if you ever go on missions there, and you got a bunion or something embarrassing that you don't want nobody to know about, don't go to the hospital, because they will tell. And they have no shame about it too. Yeah, she's got the D word, and it's not good. We're out of bedpans. They will say that in Jamaica. Like, no, and I'm like, really? Come on, class, Jamaica. Come on, let's work on that. So my grandma finds out that the lady next to her has German measles, and she knows that my mom is pregnant with child, and she knows that the complications and like the birth defects that could come out of that for the baby was not good. So she went back to my mom, and she says, "Hey, here's the deal. The lady next to you has the measles." And my mom is a nurse, so she knew. She's like, "First thing, my baby," because she knows that's what I got. Rash, they're all symptoms of measles, right, Doc? Here you go. Thank you, Doc. So she goes back, tells my mom, and my mom is getting ready to freak out, and my grandma says, Hey, Molly, you don't tell the doctors how you feel. I will go home and I will tell God. Because if they find out, they're going to take the baby. You see, in Jamaica back then, they didn't have the facilities for, when a child is born with, a certain kind of handicap or stuff like that. They didn't have that. So if this situation would arise, they would terminate a pregnancy. And so, my existence wouldn't be. And so my grandma decided that she would go home and pray, and she went home and she prayed. And then, truth be told, 3 months later, just about almost, at the full term mark, my mom was ready to deliver. While she were getting to deliver her, they realized that she did have German measles, and at that time it was full term, way too late. I was born, and I came out perfect just as I am right now. I want to be perfect. But Jesus said I should stop trying because I'll never be. I was born. Everything looked good. Little and cute, they said. Until 6 weeks into life, we all thought, well, man, God answered because they didn't come up with like missing a leg or I don't know what they are, Doc, but whatever German measles does to the infant in the womb, I don't know. That didn't happen. But I wasn't following motion. And my mom was concerned. My aunt and her had a conversation, and my aunt was trying to convince her to make sure that we get ahead of this. If there's something that, because the baby's not seeing, he's not following motion. So they took me to the eye clinic, the ophthalmologist department in Jamaica, and my aunt tells it like today. She was just around, last week she was in Rockford with me, and she tells it just like this. She says, I could hear, she said in her Jamaican accent, she says, Lennox, I could hear from the out of the room. The nurse said, doctor, don't you think this baby is blind? And the doctor says, this baby is totally blind like a bat. It was a serious thing. When my mom heard that, that was devastating news. But my grandma, when she heard, she says, all right, come, make we pray. Let's pray. And my grandmother prayed. I was born with congenital glaucoma. Glaucoma is increased pressure behind the optic nerve. So with glaucoma, if even the older you get, some people get it, it's more common. It's not as common to be born with it, but it's more common when you get older and you get it. And the older you get, it degenerates and it becomes worse, and the pressures become uncontrollable, and some people end up going blind. Well, I was born blind, and there is still no cure. You can ask the doctor in the house. There is no cure for it today, with all the modern advance in medicine. But my grandma believes, she says, I asked God to spare his life, and God heard, right? The doctors didn't find out my daughter had the measles until it was too late, right? So if he was faithful in that, then what else can he be faithful to? Because Jesus Christ was the same guy who spat in the dirt, made mud, touched the eyes of a blind man, and he was able to see. And so, as the scriptures say in Hebrews 12:13, it says, Jesus Christ, what? The same yesterday, today, and forever. So if he did that back then, he sure can do that now. So she prayed, and she continued to pray. She invited people from all walks of our community, and they gathered every Saturday night, and they prayed, and they asked God. They interceded on my behalf. And it took 8 years. I was 8 years old when the doctors went in to just relieve pressure from my eyes, not to try to make me see, because in man's eyes, in the medical profession, in the medical field, that was impossible. But when they went in and came out with a little procedure they did just to reduce pressure so it would eliminate the pain a little bit, I started seeing. The doctors were baffled by that, so they said, oh, wow, I don't know what we did. So they were trying to retrace their steps, and they couldn't figure it out because they didn't do it. The great physician did it. And so we go through this process. They say, hey, here's the deal. We need to get you to the School for the Blind, the Salvation Army, School for the Blind, where you can learn to read Braille, because obviously glaucoma is a degenerative disease, which means the older you get, you're going to get blind, you're going to go blind again. So we need to allow you to be independent so you can get an education, learn to read Braille, learn to use a cane. So I got shipped off to the Salvation Army School for the Blind to learn to read Braille. But my grandmother did not give up. She said, God is not done with what he started. He who began a good work will complete what he starts. So she continued to pray. And she says, we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. I got to the school. I'm learning to read Braille. And as time was going on, what was happening is my eyes were fighting my fingers to see the dots. My fingers, I just had to give up. And then they realized, he doesn't need to read Braille. So they introduced me to read print, write and read at the age of 12. And I picked it up, and I learned it, and things were good. I was a miracle. My grandma kept saying, you're a miracle, you were a miracle. When are you going to give your heart to Jesus? You were a miracle. And I believed it, and I loved it, and life was good. My mom was a single mom. My father was busy all over the island making children. He had 23 of them. No, not from my mom. She had 3 boys for him. And so they were not together. I didn't have a relationship with him. I didn't know him. But God was still good. My mom was in and out of the hospital, working some, being a patient for some. She beat cancer. God was good. Things were great. Things were happening. I was seeing. I was a miracle. I was a testimony. And they started a church in my front yard because of this. Things were great. But then, on November 22nd, 1993, my mom leaves to go get her prescription refill at the hospital, and on her way back stopped in the market and collapsed. had a brain aneurysm. They brought her to the hospital. She was there for 3 days, promised me that she was going to come home in 2 days. She promised me. Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, 4 a.m. in the morning, I wake up to the lights all on in my house, and I heard a sound from my grandma that I knew something was not right. And it was, I got up out of my bed and I walked towards the light. And all I could remember saying was, no, no. I just saw her. Nobody even told me the news. But I said, she told me she's coming home on Tuesday. She told me she's coming home on Tuesday. And my grandma grabbed my hands and she says, Lennox. Now, y'all, you're Americans, you call me Lennox, like I'm fine china, thank you, or air conditioned. But in Jamaica, it's actually Lennox. Yeah, man. She calls me. She's Lennox. She grabbed my hand as I'm saying, no, 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 mama, no, 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 mama, not true. Which means it's not true, I'm not true, I'm not true, no, no. She says, Lennox, God will never teach you to swim to let you drown. He's been teaching you to swim. He's done miracles after miracles after miracles, and he will not stop now. He will not stop. This is not the end of your story. He will never teach you to swim to let you drown. Those were not the words I wanted to hear, but they are the words I live by today. Remember Habakkuk? Let's go back to it. He says, watch and wait, be utterly amazed for the things I'm about to do in your lifetime. If I were to tell you these things, people, you would not believe me. And here I am. Things are going up. Then, boom, we plummet. And I'm like, where is God now? Well, lo and behold, my grandma was right. Because she did say in that thought, she said, you're going to have a family. People are going to come. Because, you see, right after that, I became an orphan. I was at the Salvation Army. I went to the Salvation Army School for the Blind, but then went to the children's home, and I was by myself. And my grandma just couldn't take care of me just because once my mom died, her health just declined. And, we were very, very poor, so she didn't have the means to do that. And my father was not involved or engaged, probably didn't even know my middle name. But as this was going on, God sent this family to the Salvation Army. It was a group of over 18-year-olds on a mission trip. Just like some of you just came back from Costa Rica from a short-term mission trip. This group came down, and the couple that was leading the group saw me. And of course, I'm this big now, but when I was 13, 14, I was this big. I mean, literally looked like a toddler, a 14-year-old body. But they came down and they met me, and they said the classic thing that every little short-term missions, people say, oh my gosh, you're so little and cute. We just want to fold you up and put you in your suitcase and bring you right back to America with us. And I was like, yay, that sounds very comfortable. Sounds great. Well, that was a joke, and they were joking. But guess what? God wasn't. And shortly after that, they did fold me up and put me, shortly after that, it was God's call on their lives. And within days, we were at the U.S. Embassy, and the U.S. Embassy said, you can't just take a boy out of the country. You can't just take, you can't do that. So come back with all these, this paperwork, all these things, death certificates, prove that his dad is not in the picture, prove that come back in 18 months. They gave us a time to come back. And in 3 hours, we were back at the U.S. Embassy with every piece of paperwork, plus a judge's, signature. And my biological father, we found him. And I was out of the country, back here, straight to Rockford, Illinois, August 5th, 2005. And here I was, God coming through like my grandma said he would. And I'm here in America. Things were great. Loved the family. Had my own room, my own bed. Hello. I could shower 2 or 3 times a day if I wanted to. Didn't have to carry water from the river. And it was always hot water, even though you don't need hot water in Jamaica. It's already hot. But, I had all the peanut butter I could eat in the world. You guys don't even understand. Some of y'all don't like granola bars. We would lick the wrapper that the granola bars came in when the missionaries would feed them to us. And here I am in America, got it all. Life was good. Again, we're going up, right? And then all of a sudden, after 3 years of living with this wonderful couple, they just said to me one day, we just feel like God's asking us to release our authority over you. So we got to find someplace else to live. Or we bought you a plane ticket back to Jamaica. And I can't tell you how devastating that news was, because this family that my grandma prophesied about, I'm losing them. What's happening? Like, God, you healed me, and then you take my mom, and then you send me here to America. Like, I'm learning to drive. I got my eyes. I got good medicine. I got good glasses. I'm getting Americanized. I'm getting the American accent, kind of. I like McDonald's, except with no pickles or onions in my burger. But I like McDonald's. I don't even have to lick the granola bar wrapper anymore. I can eat as many as I want for $2.99. And you're going to take it all away? Well, God kept me here. 4 other families in the church that we were a part of the starting of this church, they said, we're going to do a timeshare. We're going to pass the Jamaican around. We're not going to let you go back. So I live with these families, and, it might sound great, but it was hard because it was like 3 months here, then you go to another family. 3 months here, then you go to another. Then you back and forth with different cultures, different expectations. It was hard, but I got to stay. And while I was staying, the church was growing. The church became a church of 8,000 people. It was a plant of Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, and it was called Heartland Community Church, and we grew to 6,000, then 8,000, and eventually, y'all, I became the worship director. Now, I will tell you this, I never went to college, not one day of college. Well, I went one day and then dropped out. Kids, stay in school. I have to say that because parents will grab me outside and say, well, my kid, they're going to go to college, and you said you didn't go. You're a bad influence. Stay in school. Don't be like me. Don't act a fool. Anyways, I became the worship director of the largest church in the State Line area. The largest. Things were great. Met my wife there. Then we had our first child. Just before the birth of our first child, I got the news. Effective immediately, your job has been changed. You can accept this new position, or you can find another place to work. And the new position was something that I couldn't do. It was out of my wheelhouse, as what God had wired me. Should have stayed in college, kids. Listen. And my dreams that had come through in the calling at Heartland Community Church was shattered. And I was on my back in the dark in my basement for 6 months. But remember, Habakkuk says, watch and wait. Be utterly amazed for the things I'm about to do in your lifetime. If I were to tell you these things and I was laying in my basement going, God, what in the world are you going to do now? How are you going to get me out of this one? Because I didn't even go to college, and I was making lots of money because, big churches like that, they pay good when you're the worship director with lights and sound and bands. And, I had 100 people as volunteer staff. I had 3 staff members underneath me that were reported to me. I can't even manage myself. I'm managing people. Hello, it was just kind of like Joseph, you know what I mean? When he was resurrected and became the leader over all of the land and was in charge of all the food and all that. It was like me, and I didn't do anything to earn it. It was God's grace. But then all of a sudden, it's gone. And I'm like, how are you going to recover this one? Well, I started writing music, started writing a book, started telling my story. And out of that was birthed Lennox Barnett Ministries. And I started traveling all over the country, getting booked from all sorts of churches. Guys, you guys didn't hear about me? Come on, y'all. It's my first time here. Chris, Doc. I'm kidding. I am not famous at all. But I kept getting booked, and so I started traveling and started selling books. And Then I obviously remembered that I'm a mission. I came from missions, so I started traveling to Africa, purposefully trying to help orphanages. Because, like, what I didn't talk about to people was that I went through some very serious abuse in the orphanage, and neglect and rejection and things that probably not good to be talked about here, but they were traumatic for me. But I had this desire to say, if I can get into these orphanages and just like talk to the house mother and say, hey, these kids are a treasure, they are a delight, care for them, wrap your arms around them, remind them of who they are, because when you remind them of who they are, they get to know who God is. Because I believe though the Bible says God doesn't show favoritism, orphans are his favorite because they don't got no mom or dad. And he's all they got. So I traveled the world singing, sharing my story, doing all of that stuff, and then working with orphanages, trying to help them come alive and come along with healthy practices for their kids. Everything was great. I'm back up again, selling books and selling CDs and writing songs and touring. And that was how actually I got to meet Dr. Chris at a Royal Rangers camp. It was one of those gigs that I did. It was like a small gig compared to what I used to do, and I really didn't want to do it, but I did it, and I'm so glad because God had a plan for our lives to intersect. And now he and Jerry are one of my just most treasured supporters in this mission that I get to do. And here I am sharing my story now with you. So you see how God works that out? Well, everything was going good. And then 2020 hits the scene. We all can take a deep sigh and remember, right? You guys remember? You remember the promise? Oh, it's only 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, we'll be back to normal, doing our thing, being ourselves, getting and being and going after and living our best lives. Just 2 weeks of your time, America. Just stay in your house. Only 2 weeks, though. You'll be fine. And then the stuff happened, with the riots and, which lives matters and which life doesn't matter. And all of that, it just got chaotic real fast. And life, as we know it, kind of started to tailspin out of control. And then the 2 weeks turned into months, to years. Well, in that period of time, guys, I couldn't travel. I couldn't do what I normally do. I couldn't go sell no more books. I couldn't go bring Bibles to Africa. I couldn't sing. I couldn't even sing. I was singing on video for churches. Like, you guys know how awkward that is? All right, y'all, praise the Lord, people. Well, which people? The ones who will see it next week when it comes on their computer screen. And I started to take this real serious, and the trauma and the stuff that I had stuffed all started to surface, and my life unraveled, and it unraveled out of control. It got so bad with the voices and the memories and the pain and the brokenness, the mourning even of my mom's death and blaming my mom for dying when she had all of that stuff, crazy amount of trauma came to the surface in the midst of it. And guys, guess what happened? I ended up going to the lowest place I've ever been in my life, a place where I thought this world would be better without me here. And I could just stop the noise for once and stop the pain and go see Jesus. And so I was done. But God had a plan. He was not done with me. I was found out, and I was admitted into a hospital in Lennox Hospital. And it was there, a psychiatrist came in and he said, I'm going to not put you on medicines like we normally do. And he named all the things that I had, struggled with PTSD from orphanages and traveling to orphanages, depression, anxiety, trauma, lots of trauma. And he said, I'm not going to put you on medicines. I'm going to send you back out to the mission field. I said, where? To what? Did you not hear that there's no airports open? Did you not hear that there's a pandemic? And he goes, actually, what country were you going next? And I says, well, I was supposed to go to Haiti just to visit, but this was I was supposed to go all the way back in April. when the pandemic was just about to start, and because it was starting up, we were like, if the pandemic is here in the U.S., that means Haiti is wiped out. That's what we thought. So there's no way I'm going. So I didn't go. And here the psychiatrist is asking me, where are you supposed to go next? And I said, well, it was supposed to be Haiti. He goes, you're going to Haiti. I said, I am? He says, yes, you are. He says, I looked you up. I watched your videos. I watched your YouTube. I watched your web page, and what you do matters. And I feel that's what's going to heal you. I said, do you know how far I'm coming from? From blind to sight, orphan to hope, come to the United States, home, then lose that home, then lived with 4 other families, and then lost my dream job, and then started this ministry that's now successful, and then all of a sudden, I just burnt it all up. Like, what? You're going to send me back there? He said, yes. And I went back to Haiti, guys. October 18th through the 25th of 2020, okay? And I'm telling you, something happened there. Something happened. Because while I was there, I realized there was a gap between the aged out orphan and the orphan. You see, we get these World Vision stuff, and we have our sponsored children, and we got their little cute faces on our refrigerator, and we pay the $29.99 or $39.99 or $49.99 a month, and they're getting their 3 basic needs met and all that stuff, and it's great, and we get letters from them, we're excited. But then they turn 15, 16, 17, and then 18 comes, and by law in Haiti and in the rest of the world, they have to be aged out. What happens to them then? And what I've come to realize over the years is that orphanages are not equipped enough to take care of transitioning these kids, because it's an institution, it's not a home. And so what happens is you got 40 kids, and you got to be able to serve all 40 kids to make them, become alive in themselves, to know who they are and to figure out their life skills. You can't, it's not possible. And so then what happens is the orphans in Haiti, they get released at 18 with a little plastic bag, and they get sent out with a few belongings, and the gangs say, hey, you want to belong? Come here. Prostitution says, you want to make money? Come here. Sex traffickers, even Americans, call them and say, hey, I'll show you a way to actually make something of yours, or make some money with what you already have. And this is the life. 90 to 98% of our orphans. And so while I was down there in the midst of this darkest place in my life, just fighting for life at the poorest country in the entire world, God gave me a hope and a vision to say, hey, I got another thing for you. That story, all that happened to you in the orphanage, all that happened to you in the United States, you can use that and create something that would be a place where an aged-out orphan can transition from dependence to independence my way. And the really cool thing is this. We were able to launch Hope Story Missions out of the worst space in my life that I've ever been. Remember I talked to you about Psalms 40 verse 1 to 3? Psalms 40 verse 1 to 3, David said, I waited patiently on the Lord. He turned to me and he heard my cry. He lifted me out of the miry muck. He set my feet upon a rock, giving me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise. Now many will see and hear and put their trust in him. You see, life, your story, has a way, they call it a hero's journey, where you go up, and things are looking good, and then all of a sudden, there's a cliff. And we tend to, as humans, kind of go, oh my gosh, it's over, it's done. But Habakkuk says, watch and wait. Because I'm using that to bring you to here. And when you fall again, I'm using that to bring you to here. I'm using that to bring you to here. And it will continue. The story continues because you are my child. And in this world, Jesus didn't warn us. He says, you will have troubles, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. Here's the truth, folks. God has been faithful from day one. And it's not been an easy road or an easy journey, but God has been faithful. And he's taken my mess, my total mess, my shame, my darkness, and he is reviving it, and he's reconstructing it, and he's cultivating this message of hope. And so, I don't know where you are at today. I don't know what's going on in your space, your story, your life. Your life may be good. But I'm here to tell you that God is writing a story that will be a glorified encouragement to those whom you've probably never met, so that his name and renown would be the desire of their hearts. As we talked about, I was a singer-songwriter, and just before the pandemic, I penned this song that I want to share with you today, because I don't know where you're at, if you've heard my story, the ups and the downs, but here I am still standing. See, the same God who was with Moses is with me. The same God who parted the Red Seas is alive and well and working in me. The same Spirit that rose Christ from the dead is in me, and the same is true for you, and he's writing your story. He is faithful. Wherever you're at, whatever you're walking through right now, hear me say he is faithful to complete what he started, only for his glory. He is faithful. Our faith is being sure of what we hope for, being certain of the things we cannot see, because you are our God who goes before us, providing for me whenever I need. You are faithful, Lord, and your word holds true. You can be trusted in all you do. Your unfailing love surrounds my heart, and my only hope is you. Though I'm walking through the valley, Lord, I will not fear. When my circumstances surround me, I know you are near. In the middle of life's battles, you are my shield, providing for me whenever I'm in need. 'Cause you are faithful, Lord, and your word holds true. You can be trusted in all you do. Your unfailing love surrounds my heart, and my only hope is you. Great is thy faithfulness, oh God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee, and thou changest not. Thy compassion, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. You are faithful, Lord, and your word holds true. Yes, you can be trusted. my only hope is you. All my life you have been faithful. Come on, y'all believe that this morning? Let's tell him. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Yes, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. We serve a faithful God. He is more than able to accomplish that which concerns you today. I am so honored to be able to share with you today, and my prayer for you, I would say this, is that if you are in a space where you're trying to figure out what is it that God has for you in the midst of what's going on, the circumstances that you find yourself, I want to remind you as a testimony, as a living testimony, that God is not through with you yet. He is writing your story. And I pray that you'd walk out of here tonight or this afternoon committed to the fact that, hey, God, I want you to continue to write my story because you are more than able. And you can do beyond what I can imagine. You can take my mess and turn it into a message of hope. May that be your heart's cry as you walk out of here this afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Hey, I'm going to be out in the back, and I'd love to meet you. I've got some books and CDs if you want to hear more and hear more of these songs that I wrote in the season of life. Please grab one or so or two and share with a friend. Everything that we do here goes back to help these aged out boys in this transition home that we have in Haiti. And also if you because we're a church and we are the mission for the world, if you would like to partner with us, you can grab a brochure and see how you can, be a part of us and help sponsor one of our boys, monthly, and keep that story of hope in a hopeless place, Gracie, Haiti, alive in the lives of these young men who are becoming the best version of themselves because God took me and took my mess and said, hey, I'm not gonna let that go to waste, but I'm gonna allow it to be of hope in a hopeless situation for some kids who are just like you. Thank you so much for letting me share with you. God bless you and keep you. And I pray his face would continue to shine on you and that someday I'll be able to come back and share even some more. Thank you.